Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's training, Cultural Formulation Interview with the Hispanic and Latino populations, Peer Worker Perspective and Application. Please remember that the MHTTC network uses affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all activities. Our presenter for today is Dr. J. Rocky Romero. He's the CEO and owner of GR Romero and Associates, and training a consultant company he started almost 20 years ago. In addition, Dr. Romero is a former assistant professor for the New Mexico Highlands University School of Social Work in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He served as the co-chair for Governor Richardson appointed New Mexico Higher Education Department on Cultural Competency Task Force. Dr. Romero has also served as an executive council member for the New Mexico Consortium for Behavioral Health Training and Research, to include other boards and committees. In addition, Dr. Romero completed his doctoral studies at the University of New Mexico in Language, Literacy, and Sociocultural Studies with a focus on analyzing legal discourse through a critical race theory lens. Dr. Romero has been a training and consultant for the National Hispanic and Latino MHTTC for the last 10 years. In addition, he is a trainer for Claire Matrix, formerly the Matrix Institute, for the last 12 years. He's also focused on culturally appropriate treatment while focusing on reducing health disparities for people of color. Lastly, Dr. Romero is focused on the intersection of racism, discrimination, and the impact of racialized legal discourse on people of color. Now it's Cindy with the poll questions.
Thank you, Christine. We're going to start with the pre-questions, and the first one says, the outline for cultural formulation was first introduced in the DSM-5, and it's a true or false question. (73% said true, 27% said false. The second question says, discussing spirituality, religion, and moral traditions provides insight into the client's coping strategies and social resources. Once again, true or false? (93% said true, 7% said false. Our last question. Cultural identity can help to develop person-centered approaches to diagnostic assessment and treatment planning. Once again, true or false? And 94% said true, 6% said false. That was our last question. So without further ado, I'm going to leave you with Dr. Romero.
All right, thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Dr. Christine Miranda. I want to welcome you all back, those of you that have been attending the first two parts to this series, and then any of you that are new. I'm Rocky Romero. I am coming to you actually from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and today we're continuing our discussion, but really now starting to kind of hone in a little bit of the skills that we've built on or introduced to you in the first two sections. Today, focusing on really looking at resources for peers, obviously those of you that are working with Hispanic and Latino populations, and specifically looking at the cultural formulation interview. Part of what I want to give you all is just kind of the lens from a peer perspective in terms of how you can play an integral part of this clinical process in helping clinicians to come up with and create the best clinical formulation that we can. So the goals for today: provide some practical resources for you all working with Hispanic and Latino populations in terms of mental health providers, and we try to give kind of a broad stroke of mental health providers. So you'll hear me utilize obviously certified peer support workers as well as clinicians, and that primarily is the main focus. But we definitely want to talk about things from a more multidisciplinary team approach as well. And then the second goal is to review use of the cultural formulation interview as an assessment tool when we're working with Hispanic and Latino populations. So we're hopeful that this will give you some insight and another tool as far as a cultural interview process that really helps to formulate next steps in terms of treatment plan, service plan, identifying needs from a cultural lens. And the objectives, again, are to identify resources that may facilitate the incorporation, again, of culture as part of assessment, case formulation and treatment, and then promote the use of the CFI, the cultural formulation interview, when providing mental health services for Hispanic and Latino populations. The last objective is to identify usefulness of cultural case formulations, again, when working with the Hispanic and Latino populations, specifically with mental health disorders. This is a link, and we felt it was important to include this. These links are specifically self-assessments or critical self-assessments for providers, especially those that may have not done that sort of work before, where it really kind of takes a look at potentially blind spots in our practice and areas that maybe we need to study on, do more reflection on, do our own personal work on in terms of self-assessment. So we really want to make sure that we shared these links with you, and that you're able to kind of use those in the development. As I've said through the first couple of series, really looking at ourselves in terms of and in relation to people that are from different races and different cultures. In this case, obviously Hispanic and Latino populations. If you come from that race or that culture, or if you don't, these will give you those tools to really kind of be able to understand our views and even potentially some biases that may get in our way and impact in a negative way the interaction or the therapeutic alliance, which I strongly believe peers have a critical role in making that connection and helping facilitate that therapeutic alliance with the clinical team. So the clinical formulation interview, looking at the development and really making sure that we, look at things from the development of the client, especially if we have clients in your community that you're working with that are coming from an immigration experience, whether that's a positive immigration experience or one that is filled with trauma and other types of violent experiences. We really want to help, utilize this clinical formulation to develop and assess, a clinical picture. And at times, given that clinicians may only meet with the client once a week or once every 2 weeks, or in some cases, depending on the client and the need, maybe it's once a month. But peer support workers that we know are in more agencies now than ever before. We want to really arm them with the ability to create that alliance so that they can provide another lens or some snapshots of the client's cultural specific aspects that they may draw strength from, that they may draw protection from, that are considered protective factors. So we definitely want to account for the influence of culture. We want to enhance the clinician and participant communication in all encounters. So as a peer, I think what I see is that your way of connecting with clients from real lived experiences, real life, from a perspective of understanding culturally because obviously many of you come from the communities you serve, are able to really enhance that relationship and build upon that. And we believe that that would, in the long run, increase and improve outcomes for Latino and Hispanic communities and families. So as we've known, this isn't anything new. This comes from the APA 2013, but values, orientations, knowledge, and practices that individuals use to understand their experiences. Again, we've talked about this in the first two series, so I don't want to kind of go over and be redundant, but just kind of gives you in context, understanding people's backgrounds, their experience. Again, I think a big piece to this is acculturation and also immigration as part of the evolution of cultural perspectives. And then we also have to definitely see, regarding bullet number 3 here, influence of family, friends, and other community members. So we really have to understand and kind of doing an eco map, if you will, coming from the social work world of, you know, what are clients' community-based contact, what does that look like? What does it look like from family and friends? And then are there any direct networks that the client is involved in? Is definitely something we want to you know going into treatment planning. So culture may influence, again, how we identify health conditions. If we do or don't seek help, it may determine how we experience and maybe even prioritize symptoms in our lives, and then it may or may not impact the participation in care. So we really want to identify the potential influences that are obviously informing the decision making of clients, which will help us kind of get through if there's barriers or if there is definitely avenues and opportunities to make connections. So for clinicians, culture may influence, and again, this has to do with the overall clinical picture. But again, if clinicians aren't able to be in direct contact with clients as consistent as our peers may be in your organization or agency, then it allows peers to kind of get that viewpoint and that vantage point and share that with the clinical team. And I definitely believe the clinical formulation interview can help with that, even if you adapt that formulation interview that we'll talk about in just a little while. But it can definitely help determine whether an experience is an illness or if it's something else going on. You know, we definitely understand the impact of other cultural factors that we've talked about in the last couple of months in our first two-part series, or 2 parts to this series, which was, you know, looking at some of the cultural idioms of distress and really understanding mal de ojo, understanding you know, susto, and those sort of things that we've introduced in order for us to understand how to best approach the client. So we can, again, support the individual, structure our work settings, obviously, according to those needs, and then developing a moral stance toward care in terms of the importance that we see in regard to culture from a clinical and an agency standpoint. This definitely helps to provide kind of a stance, and culture is a centerpiece, and it should be included in any assessment, intake, or treatment planning that we are creating for clients, especially from the Latino and Hispanic communities. So this is kind of just an overview of the interview. There's 16 questions. There's the core, the informant, and the supplementary, and it basically kind of follows the bullets that you see there, kind of looking at what are the reasons or causality or etiology of you know, the disorder or the symptoms that are being presented. At what level is the client functioning? Do they have a social network? What other psychosocial stressors may be impacting their current presentation? And then looking at spirituality, religion, and moral traditions. So these are the parts that we start to really see peers able to really draw some of this out in order to help paint a more clear clinical picture and help to present the best opportunity for healing for clients. And some of the big mistakes that we make, I believe, are at intake and assessment, when we're not considering culture. And sometimes what we see in the research is that there's misdiagnosis that goes on. There's sometimes a lack of connection with the provider or mental health provider and or medical provider because there's no awareness of some of the cultural identity needs of the client that they're serving. So I strongly believe the peer, as a peer support worker, can help facilitate that patient-clinician relationship. We definitely look at some of the history of school-aged and adolescent stuff that may be going on, and or family issues that may be rising up. And then we have looking at older adults, if that's the population you're serving. And it also gives some aspects around immigrants and refugees and what that experience is like. So it's a very rich interview. Again, a lot of people, it's interesting, when we've done this presentation before, a lot of people don't know about this. And again, this cultural formulation interview is included within the DSM. So you want to look for that. And I believe we give you the references, or we can maybe post those specific interview form on our chat room here later on today. So the outline for cultural formulation interview, or outline for the development of the formulation, and really I think it's important that we take our time in this, right? Some things that we know is that people often try to jump to intervention and jump to the treatment side of the work, and I think that peers have the ability, along with the clinician, to really take some time up front to build some rapport and build some trust that will help us, I think, create a better cultural identity picture of the individual. So it should be comprehensive. We definitely know that a person's identity may shift across time, context, and expectations. And we even see that a lot more when we're looking at someone who has immigrated to this country and what that experience of immigration looks like for them. It may impact that person significantly. And when we talk about the families that are still incarcerated and being kept in holding cells, and the kids that have been separated from families, we know that there's going to be some outcomes and not very good outcomes from those experiences. So we have to be prepared in order to best deal with that trauma, and specifically looking at that experience across time, context, and expectations is a huge piece to this. And then we look at acculturation, right, as a kind of the second piece after immigration. Definitely never one-sided, and I think, again, like I've been kind of talking about this morning, your work as peers will definitely help the clinician and help the clinical process. So a lot of times I hear, and I want to, that's kind of why we thought these presentation or the series was important, in talking with folks from, New Mexico Office of Peer Recovery and Engagement, is that oftentimes there's a separation of us against them or us and them, right? Where peers are kind of their own, they're doing their kind of work, and then there's the clinicians. And I firmly believe that we have to integrate that. We have to be able to see peers from a clinical standpoint. And myself being a clinician for a lot of years now, we see the importance, or I see the importance of peers being able to help me facilitate this cultural awareness through the lens of the clinical kind of aspects, but also through the lens of the individual, right? So allowing the individual to really connect with peers can also help us to understand, which takes us to the next slide, the cultural explanations of illness, right? So the symptoms, the severity, meaning in relation to cultural norms and causes, the course of the illness, and then experiences with care and treatment expectation. And when we talk about treatment expectation, I think let's be clear that that doesn't always mean through a medical provider, let's say through an HMO, or through a Presbyterian or Loveless or anything like that. This may be more from a traditional means. This may be more from curanderas and healers in the community, maybe even people affiliated with the church or with other sorts of religious groups. So let's be cautious that we don't lock people into specific treatment expectations Of course, when they come to us for services to a degree, as clinicians, we have to do that, and you know, I understand that part, but let's be cautious in that. And then looking at cultural factors related to psychosocial environments and levels of functioning, we always want to do an assessment of the supports and stressors. We also want to take a look, looking through the protective and risk factors lenses, right, of understanding that sometimes there's community aspects in the environment that may serve as protective factors for families, which may be in the realm of, like I said, healers, other clergy or spiritual leaders, maybe even just a connection with, again, a family friend that is giving them advice, their comadre, so to speak, right, or compadre, and someone that they seek for counsel. Those are, and a lot of times we don't see those from a clinical standpoint as you know, direct impact psychosocially. And I think that's the mistake we make, is we don't see how those relationships, interactions are extremely important, especially now that we have COVID, right? Those of you that come from the Hispanic and Latino populations, you know how social many of us are, and this time in COVID has really impacted our psychosocial environment, right? Our ability to connect with others, and that is impacting a lot of people. And we have to be aware of that and understand how that's going to impact, you know, the after effects of that impact, how it's going to create a need for us to pay attention to those things clinically, and even with respect to the relationship. So cultural elements of the relationship between the individual and client, we definitely know that this is an important piece to the process for understanding you know, the relationship, the therapeutic alliance, like I mentioned earlier, and then really clearly identifying expectations, role definitions, and resources that the client may bring to the encounter, but then also I think peers can offer a critical lens in terms of what are the gaps in the needs of this individual that I can then help facilitate. And the clinician can continue that mental health work and really looking at some of the other specific stressors. But I think the peer offers a different relief from stressors, right? When they're able to help with housing, they're able to look at some of the nutrition and food needs. They're able to help with potentially other substance abuse or other related needs that they have. That we need to definitely consider and have that input. So some supplementary modules, you know, there's obviously the explanatory model, which looks at maximizing treatment engagement and adherence, increasing positive expectancy. There's again, this building of empathy and therapeutic alliance. And I always say it that we have to do a better job in terms of not promoting or reifying or continuing to promote a hierarchy type of relationship. When clients come to us, especially those from Latino and Hispanic populations, and even more so, kind of drilling down a little bit more, those that come from immigrant populations that have immigrated to this country see us in a hierarchy, right? From the beginning, they see us in whatever affiliation we have with an agency as having some power and authority, maybe even power and authority over them or their you know, future in terms of if they work with you. So we have to understand and kind of shift that, if you will, into this more parallel or horizontal type of relationship, right, where people are able to work side by side, and as a clinician and a peer especially is able to be more collaborative in relationship building, which we definitely believe will increase positive expectancy. Again, it builds empathy and increases the therapeutic alliance, can definitely start to address catastrophic cognitions or addresses stigma. And that's part of it, right? We talk about this and we're engaging more in this discussion. And those of you that are interested in kind of looking at the intersections of mental health and racism, please join us tomorrow. We have a presentation also covering those sort of ends. But looking at where we are as a society right now, really helping clients to understand that the feelings that they have are valid about maybe being treated differently, or maybe have experienced discrimination or racism. At times, I think those sort of feelings that clients bring to the clinical picture maybe kind of shed for other descriptions or other reasons for or causes for those feelings. And it may be very well racism and discrimination that people are experiencing that we've kind of brushed aside for a while. So looking at the level of functioning, we want to make sure that we understand from the client's perspective what they expect their level of functioning to be if it's not optimal, or they see a need to improve, and then kind of looking at that and what it's going to take, what objectives are going to get us there, right? When we identify that goal, level of functioning is definitely an important component of clinical assessment. And I think, again, from a peer perspective, helping with the clinical formulation interview, or even creating an adaptation to that to use with your clients, I think is going to be very helpful in giving you this picture. And then clarify level of impairment also, I think, allows us to determine how we can sensitively and culturally approach interventions, right? Not all interventions are clinically indicated for every single client. So it helps us to slow down and understand what functioning someone is coming to us in terms of the needs that they're presenting through the information and the formulation of the assessment process. The social network, again, is really just understanding, and that's usually where kind of this eco map, for those of you that have never done an eco map, it's looking like, it's kind of just has circles with the client in the center, and then it identifies all the different systems this client may be influenced or involved with, and then you can draw lines to each one of those circles. Sometimes the lines are perforated, sometimes they're double lines. The lines can serve as a code for the type of relationship and influence that system may have on the client. And again, a lot of times there's protective and risk factors that we can identify with social networks as well. Some of the psychosocial stressors that we see is individualism, but it also kind of falls within that continuum of collectivism, because I think nowadays as well, like I said in the previous slide, we're seeing a lot of fallout from society in terms of racial discrimination, and I think Latinos and Hispanic communities are starting to realize that collectively they experience these things, and I'm hopeful that that can create, excuse me, a resource and some agency with the Latino and Hispanic communities of obviously reflecting how powerful we can be when we're united and we're moving in a collective manner. And if we go back to some of the history, that culturally is how Latino and Hispanic communities, not only in the United States but in other countries, seem to work best, right? Collectively in a community, as we've, the old adage, it takes a community to raise a child kind of approach. And with these approaches and understanding that, it can definitely help us with our understanding of the overall situation, definitely understanding diagnosis and making a more appropriate diagnosis, even if we have to rule out or include, rule out diagnoses as we're evolving this cultural formulation interview. I think that's a safer place to be, rather than just slapping a diagnosis on someone and calling it a day, rather than taking some time and ruling out diagnosis and then making a more informed decision as you move down the road. We definitely know, again, more spirituality, religion, and moral traditions can definitely impact and help to present a lens for you to look through on what may influence treatment decision making, their goals, some of their personal coping strategies, and maybe any other social resources they may have in the community, including religious and spiritual strength. So it really gives you, it provides a lens and a framework for exploring a person's identity. Like I've said, the role of spirituality, religion, and moral traditions. But it'll also help you to understand potential clinical treatment plan areas that you may consider that may be, again, clinically appropriate, but also may help to facilitate a connection with those different areas if you're looking through that cultural lens. So again, cultural identity, definitely people adopt different identities based on social relationships. This always reminds me, this slide is to remind you about the acculturation process that people experience, right? Really looking at it from how do younger generations compared to our elders and older generations, how do they acculturate, and at what are they acculturating at the same rate? Meaning that, and it definitely does not look that way, right? Where we know that young Latino and Hispanic people that immigrate here from other countries, they tend to acculturate at a much more rapid pace because of their exposure to schools, to social networks, to the internet, and to smartphones and all that stuff. And then, of course, grandparents and parents of those youngsters tend to maybe acculturate at a slower pace. Many times they tend to want to hold on to beliefs and traditions from their cultural identity in their home country, and we have to kind of really assess where that and what that looks like. So the CFI, and then of course their supplementary modules contain questions to address the relevance of a person's identity and again the presenting concern. This is an area that it looks at what are the helping and coping seeking strategies. If this person has one, we want to see those. You know, have they sought out other mental health providers? Have they gone to the school and sought out family help or family support if it is, you know, an adolescent or child that's involved? What are the specific strategies? And those don't always have to be formal strategies, right? Formal strategies are those that I just described. Informal may be, again, a comadre or a community member that they seek counsel from, that's very much a community leader and or religious or spiritual leaders as well. And I think that will definitely help to understand to a degree the acculturation also with the mental health providers, right? Have they been acculturated to that practice, or is this their first experience coming to an agency and seeking mental health services? The patient-clinician relationship and again the patient-peer relationship definitely creates a promotion and adherence to treatment and retention of the information that we're teaching. We always have to understand that transference and countertransference are impacted by culture and can be influenced in a positive way by culture. If there is a peer involved in this clinical relationship, the chances are that there can be a relationship forged that will also impact the clinician relationship. And what I mean by that is, you know, sometimes peers can kind of share with clients, you know, this guy's not that bad, give him a chance, you know, get to know him and you know, see how you relate to him or her, or the, you know, the clinician, the person. So a peer support worker can always influence that relationship in many ways, and sometimes can impact that relationship in a negative way. And I say this, you know, again, with what I mentioned earlier, if as a peer or as a clinician, we're coming from this us against them or us and them, peers and then clinicians on this other side, you know, clients pick that up. And I don't think that's a very ethical or a responsible place to be in the clinical relationship. So being able to, as a clinician, say, to your clients, you know what, peers are a part of our team. Please treat them as you would myself, with all the utmost respect, and you know, connect with them, and then vice versa, right? A peer can help the clinician by saying, hey, you know, give him a chance. He's a good clinician. He's here to help you. He's here to support you. You know, I've been working with him a while, and I know him, and I trust him. And so there's ways that there can be a relationship kind of ally between clinician and peer that I really think is is important. I think that needs to be fostered more, even in within agency trainings that are being done and put out there. And again, that's one of the main reasons we wanted to do this training and felt it was important. Obviously, if there's school-age children or adolescents involved, you want to include them. If you have, it's awesome if you have peers that are, in schools, they now have peers and folks that are able to do some of that work. If you're a clinician that is working with a client in high school, you may look at what are those peer groups that are open in schools that you may be able to connect with as another resources. And then it's always important, obviously, to ask and be aware of age-appropriate questions. The clinical formulation interview, I think, is definitely more appropriate for adults, but I think if you really take some time and sit with it, you could adapt it to adolescents and potentially even school-aged children, of course, with the parent accompanying them and being a part of that discussion as well. And then, of course, with older adults, we definitely want to explore unique identities or medical history, whether that's mental health and or medical issues going on. And the clinical formulation interview also helps with that because there's also belief systems that are embedded within Latino and Hispanic cultures around aging and around expectations of elders. And I think it's important to kind of get that clarity if you're working with the elderly population as well. And especially if you have peers, if you have, and I know Secretary Katrina Holtram Lopez is really working on a peer support kind of piece for elders. So really looking at our elders to work with other elders, their peers, right, as a support system, because we know that sometimes our older adults may be experiencing depression, loneliness. Obviously, some may be experiencing other mental health issues like dementia or Alzheimer's, and having a peer that's able to relate to them and connect them to resources is definitely beneficial. That project gets going. Immigrants and refugees. So I think I gave you guys a dose of this as we talked about this morning, but it's really being able to have the clinician get more information from a peer interfacing with refugees or immigrants and being able to provide that experience or that connection for that experience, because we know that there's a lot of pre-immigration difficulties, like I mentioned, and then on the immigration journey itself, for many people, it's not a fluid process. Sometimes they may be stuck in other countries in between, a lack of food, a lack of resources, exposure to violence, persecution. We've heard from, there's another training that the MHTTC does around looking at specific age children coming into a school that's specifically looking at immigration issues and young people dealing with that. And there's a lot of gang violence and a lot of other experiences that are very traumatizing. So we know that the immigration process may increase the potential for adverse childhood experiences, not only in childhood, but also in adolescent years as well. If there's other caregivers as a part, as you all know, the Latino and Hispanic family and extended family, it runs deep. So sometimes there's aunts and uncles, cousins, other family members raising, our elders and being a caregiver for somebody within the family. And I know a lot of times at the end of life, there may be a family member that's hired to be, providing some level of ongoing care, as well as kind of that connection to hospice and end of life processes. So really being able to work with caregivers is definitely a role, I think, that peers can help facilitate, so that clinicians have also that lens of what's going on with that sort of connection to other emotional and potentially medical support as well. And then the different settings, of course, there's transitional outpatient treatment, and then at the bottom, the most acute treatment, which is, looking at emergency department stabilization. What we want to know, and why we put this here, is I think it's important for us to know that peers can be involved at every single one of these levels. and we're seeing it more and more. You know, there's a body of advocates that are definitely supportive of peers, and that includes myself and the MHTTC folks, in terms of really knowing the benefit of having a peer that is culturally trained to be able to connect with clients and connect them through these different services. So we really want to make sure that people are you know, aware of that, and trying to infuse peers at every one of these different levels. So now we're going to kind of look at some of the implementation aspects, and let me take a quick look, about 9:45 or so. Alrighty, so we're going to kind of look at some of the implementation aspects. There is a short video here that I want to share with you guys. It's not short, but I'm going to show you a shorter clip of it. And I think it's really worthwhile to look at it like I've done in the past, and that's inclusive of the links that I gave to you guys earlier, you know, for the self-reflection assessments, you know, looking culturally at things. These next kind of pieces will also really help with that, and the next tool, the video, and then of course the other documents, and I'll upload them here shortly if I can, to the chat room, so that everybody has those as well. But you know, the SAMHSA handouts that I have are I think a good tool for folks, and we'll go ahead and look at those. So let me stop sharing my screen here real quick, and I'm gonna pull these up here. Alrighty. And I'm going to actually go ahead, and while I'm here, let me just go ahead and put these in here in the chat room for you guys, so you have those. And I think these will be, again, if you didn't have these from last time, I want to just make sure everybody on the call has these again, so that we're all on the same page. Oops, and I'm not too sure. Let me see. Alrighty. So let me, yeah.
You can go ahead, if you want them, you can drop them on the handout tab, and it should like upload the file so that people can download it.
Yeah, I was trying to also see where on here. I'm sorry, I didn't see this. Where can I share my screen from so I can actually pull up the handout themselves? Am I able to do that?
Repeat that again, sorry.
How can I share my screen? I want to share a different screen, not the PowerPoint, but just the screen with the handout.
Well, we're looking at your whole screen right now, so you can just open whichever and like.
So just open it fully. All right, thank you, Cindy.
You're welcome.
Alrighty, so there it is for you all. This is one of the forms that I wanted to introduce to you all. And again, this just gives you from, I think, a peer perspective, what you could be doing within some of these realms, right? So I'm going to kind of go through each one of these. Each one of these has, and I'm not going to go, you know, in detail, but I want to introduce these to you all so you have these as a resources. Sometimes it's helpful at your agency if you're not sure what your role is, or if they're just developing a role for peers and they hire some peers into that, and you have some say in how that role gets developed. This may help you with that development and evolution. So this one is specific for peer supporting recovery from substance use disorder. So what are peer recovery support services? And it kind of gives you an overview. They involve the process of giving and receiving non-clinical assistance to support long-term recovery from substance use disorders. A peer recovery coach brings the lived experience of recovery combined with training and supervision to assist others in initiating and maintaining recovery. So it goes down, and on the bottom half of this sheet, you can see there, it looks at what do peer recovery coaches do. And we want to make sure that you have an understanding in kind of the bulleted pieces here. Emotional informational, instrumental, and affiliational support. So, providing empathy and concern for that individual. Those of you that are in your own, coming from your own recovery and are in recovery and now a peer support worker, you have some ideas here, because sometimes it's not clear. When we come from our own recovery and now we're, promoting and helping someone in their own recovery, so that role changes and shifts, and we really want to make sure that this perspective, and this is always coming from a person or client-centered approach, which I really like, in terms of the resource. So informational is connections to information and referrals to community resources that support health and wellness. And then instrumental, and the way that SAMHSA is defining these services are concrete supports such as housing or employment. Now for instrumental, I always see those as kind of the, what can I say? Almost to a degree, looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Relative to, does this person have food, shelter, and water as kind of the basis for their needs? And then as it goes up, right, do they have the other resources that they need, shelter and housing and other connection to communities and to other people, right? And then affiliational support, are they connected to other community supports, activities, and events? So kind of the social aspect of recovery. And then of course, if you're a peer that is maybe helping with their mental health, and they're seeing someone else for their substance abuse or their addiction, then you can definitely help to connect those providers or agencies together so that everybody's on the same page. So some of this research is a little older, but I think now with and I truly am impressed with the infusion of peers in New Mexico, at least. And I just recently did a training for the state of Pennsylvania, several trainings actually, for the state of Pennsylvania for their providers in addiction and substance abuse treatment. And we, are really, it's really cool to see peers infused in different agencies and different recovery community-based agencies, around the country. So these are some of the reasons and what having a peer recovery coach can do to affect and impact, services. And obviously, as peers, you guys play an integral role in that. So now let me bring up the other one that I wanted to share with you guys. So that was the substance abuse, and I'll upload these to make sure everybody has them available. This one is looking at the benefits of peer support for parents and other caregivers. So, this one will really give you kind of a lens of what a peer support worker would do to support parents, and what does that look like, right? Sometimes, we can ask the family and they're not sure, or they can't really give a clear indication. So this is going to kind of help us to narrow that down. And I'll just kind of read the first paragraph of this. What is peer support for parents and other caregivers? So parent peer support, also commonly called family peer support or family support services, offers hope, guidance, and advocacy and camaraderie for parents and caregivers of children and youth receiving services for mental health, substance use, and related service systems. And then under the second section, what do parent support providers do? Provide emotional connection, right, from people who have been there, like you all, those of you that are peers on the call, and those of you that are clinicians maybe on this training, that could be a potential connection for you, is have a peer really connect and provide that emotional connection as well. And in addition to your mental health support, provide informational educational support to the systems and strategies that are available, and then support for parents by providing them either some resources or maybe even holding a small support group for families, right? And then concrete support like childcare and transportation, which many of us know is one of the biggest expenses that families typically have is transportation and childcare. And a lot of times childcare impacts their ability to get to services. And then some other common services, again, that you can see there on the right. And then what are the benefits, the next sheet here, what are the benefits of parent support services? Increased sense of collaboration. I see parents getting a huge boost of self-esteem once we have peers or other family coaches working with them in terms of self-efficacy. And it helps them to recognize that they need to take care of themselves, right? So self-care. And it can empower them. One of the biggest goals or successes of this or outcomes is that it increases their empowerment to take action and to really promote their family and do healthy activities and kind of carry through some of the work that you've done. And we hope that it decreases family isolation, right? It gets parents and families out. I know now during COVID, we have to take that in stride, but practicing safe social distancing, wearing masks, and still being able to get outside and go to the park or go fishing or go to a lake. Those are also, especially for us in New Mexico, those are things that are available. I don't think the governor's recent restriction changes impacted, ability to visit parks and camping, as long as the parties are, I think, no more than 6 or more, I believe. Okay, so the next one here is the this guy. So for this one, this is looking at just peer support in general, right? What is peer support? What does a peer support worker do? Because I strongly believe that you as peer support workers, those of you that are in that role currently or just getting graduated or just starting, sometimes you have to be the advocate for peer support work, and you have to be the megahorn out there blowing out peer support works, peer advocate works. These sort of forums are giving you some of that data and really giving you some SAMHSA specific tools to be able to use in your advocacy. So we want to really be able to provide that for you. And as you all know, peer support workers inspire hope that people can and do recover. You all are that hope. You all are that, for many people that see you peers in your recovery and doing really good and making better decisions for yourself and taking care of yourself. Those are really examples for others that they see you as the shining light and being able to say, okay, I can get there now. That shining light that they see is no longer a train coming at them. It's you as hope, as a glimmer of hope that can connect them to other recovery and to other more positive journeys. You can help dispel myths about what it means to have a mental health condition, and especially addiction, right? We and you as peer support workers can be those folks that impact how people look at recovery and people dealing with addictions. You can definitely be provide a link to self-help and support people by identifying their goals, by introducing them to this cultural formulation interview, and really having a clinical and a cultural perspective merged together for the best outcome of your clients. And then the second page here, does peer support make a difference? And what's really cool is not under all of these, right? So here, and I think you can see me moving my cursor on all these arrows here that you see on the second page on the top half. You see the references that it also provides to you, right? So increased self-esteem and confidence, increased sense of control and ability to bring about change in their lives. Raised empowerment scores, decreased psychotic symptoms, increased empathy and acceptance, increased sense of hope and inspiration, increased sense that treatment is responsive and inclusive of needs, and potentially increased engagement in self-care and wellness. A huge one, which is saving people a lot of money, is reduced hospital admission rates and longer community tenure. And then by increasing social support and social functioning, we've decreased substance abuse and depression, or you all have, right, as peer support workers. So there's a body of evidence that we have to be able to see as meaningful for the work that you all are doing with people. And then the last one that I want to show you guys here is the one for what is peer support and recovery for mental health conditions, right? So peer support encompasses a range of activities and interactions between people who have shared similar experiences of being diagnosed with mental health conditions. This mutuality, often called peerness, became a peer worker and person using services promotes, between a peer worker and a person using services promotes connection and inspires hope. Peer support offers a level of acceptance, understanding, and validation not found in many other professional relationships. So on the bottom half of this, what do you as peer support specialists do? Provide emotional empathy and camaraderie, informational, so you're connecting this client to other resources. You're instrumental in concrete support such as housing and employment, or food and shelter and connection to people. And then affiliational support, connections to community supports, activities, and events. And then this is kind of just a summary of some of the things, and some of these are similar across the board, which, obviously we want to see that as well. But these are just 4 tools for you to use, not only in your work, but also in the work that you all do for for promoting recovery and promoting peer support. So I'm going to go ahead back to sharing this screen with you guys. And let me see if this will pull up the video from here. Yes.
Her father has a diagnosis of Alzheimer's.
So let me go ahead and just kind of preview this video for you all real quick. This video is actually, Dr. Saenz, who we see here on the left, is actually the creator of the clinical formulation interview. And it just gives you, and I know sometimes over a webinar, so I apologize for the delay. I'm trying to let it kind of buffer a little bit so we have a steady stream. This is just a demonstration of the cultural formulation interview. And I honestly believe that if, as an agency, you guys are obviously hired at an agency that has clinical support services, I would definitely see the peer being able to do a clinical formulation interview, maybe even directly with the client as appropriate for their scope of service. And then also being able to sit in with the clinician while they're conducting the clinical formulation interview, even if it's just as an emotional support for a client, again, as the clinician sees appropriate in that. So I'm just going to let me see what time, we're at about 10 o'clock, so we're close to finishing or wrapping up our hour-long presentation, and then we have 15-20 minutes for some questions, and then we'll let you guys get on with your morning. So I'm going to share this with you for about 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll stop, and I'll kind of summarize our learning for today, and we'll answer any questions that you may have.
Disease, and her husband works full-time to support the family. She and her husband immigrated from Mexico to the United States about 20 years ago. She has several extended family members that live in her neighborhood. However, she has had a recent disagreement with a cousin regarding a legal dispute. The police have visited her home on 2 occasions to question her. She has started limiting her contact with her extended family because of this dispute. She has become more irritable with her children when caring for her parents. She worries that the police are going to, again, come to her home to question her. And because of this, she keeps the blinds shut and occasionally looks out the window to determine if police are in her neighborhood. She occasionally has to take breaks from her housework because she feels like crying, and she does this in her room away from other family members. Her housework tires her out, and some days she does not feel like she can complete all the tasks that she would like to do. She feels distracted from her work by her worries. She also worries at night, which makes it difficult to fall asleep. She will often lay in bed throughout the night, but feels she only gets 3 or 4 hours of sleep. Sometimes she notices a tingling sensation in her hands and feet, feels hot, and feels sick to her stomach. These feelings eventually pass after about 30 minutes. She has not discussed her feelings with her family because she is the caretaker and she doesn't want to burden them with her worries. Her children, her children have noticed that she's not getting their laundry done in a timely fashion. She no longer wants to spend time with other people. She has had stomach upset and she's not eating as much as she usually does. Actually, the opposite. She's found that she's eating more than she typically does. She has had thoughts that it would be easier if she was no longer alive. However, no active suicidal ideation. She is Christian and feels that suicide is a sin. She does not drink alcohol, smoke cigarettes, or use other illicit substances. She does drink about 1 liter of regular Coke per day.
Well, thank you for coming in. I'm Dr. Lewis, and we're going to do an initial interview to see how you've been feeling. Now, I would like to understand the problems that bring you here so that I can help you more effectively. I want to know about your experience and ideas, and I'll ask some questions about what is going on and how you're dealing with it. Is that okay? What brings you here today?
Well, I cannot sleep, and also I am worried too much, and I cannot do everything I have to do at home. So I'm concerned about those things.
Yes, they do sound concerning. People often understand their problems in their own way, which may be similar or different from how doctors understand them. How would how doctors describe the problem? How would you describe your problem?
Well, I got in this argument with my cousin, and I feel like everybody's against me, and my family who lives around, they believe that it's my fault what happened, and I cannot trust my family right now because of that, and I feel like I did something wrong, and also I think he's not fair because he called the police, he get involved the police, and that's not good. I mean, we don't do that. I mean, family can't just call the police on you, and I really worry about that. I don't want the police to come at my home or anything like that. I'm scared about that.
It sounds like you're really worried.
Yeah, because there is a lot of things involved, The fact that, well, I know that everything I am going to say to you is going to be confidential, but I want to be sure because there is a lot I can risk here, and I don't want to risk my family in this situation.
Well, I'm glad you're raising that point. Everything you say here is confidential.
Okay.
The only things that I would be concerned about in terms of not being confidential is if you tell me that you're going to hurt somebody, or possibly if you tell me that you're going to try to kill yourself. Those are the two areas where I may have to do something about it. But other than that, other things are confidential.
Okay. Well, the thing is that because my cousin called the police, they have been twice my home, and they are making a lot of questions to us, and because what happened between me and my cousin, and now I'm really afraid that the police came again. But and then if they say that we have to go to the police station, we have a lot to risk because we are undocumented here, and we have been here for 20 years, and we just cannot afford to come back, and a lot of things are going on right now. So I feel like I have a lot of anxiety about that thinking, and I worry too much, and I cannot sleep, and I just sleep for 3 or 4 hours and I am awake and I have to, and thinking, and my husband says that this is because the stress. And I feel stressed for all these things. I mean, I don't want to be deported. I don't want to raise my family, my children born here. And if we go back, I mean, I don't have anything there. Right now, my 3 years ago, my parents came to the United States and my father is really ill. I have to take care of him. My mother is really old and there is too many things going on.
Yes, it sure sounds like there's a lot of things that you worry about. When you talk about this with your husband, for example, how do you describe your problem to him?
Well, I told him that this is not fair what is happening between me and my cousin.
Alrighty, so you guys kind of get the sense there. I'm sorry, let me pull down my screen here. You get the sense of what that kind of video would be like. I definitely think that video is a good opportunity for clinicians or clinical supervisors who oversee peers. Is actually what we would do if we had more time in a half-day training, or if you want to reach out to us at the MHTTC to do the training for you all with your staff, please don't hesitate to do that. But what I see is that the ability to have the first couple of series that we've done where we taught the idioms of distress and really looking at that, this tool or the video that you could watch would be a really good instrument to have a peer do the clinical formulation interview while they are watching the video, or watch the video and then complete the interview, but also to be able to then apply the idioms of distress that we've introduced the first prior 2 series to really come up with a solid clinical formulation and again diagnosis for the clients. So with that, we're going to go ahead and conclude our presentation for today. Please join us next month. We have our last series session for November, and then I think we're going to try to do something in January or February that's based around our new suicide prevention model approach. So I want to draw your attention here to our last slide. Looking at our leadership in Dr. Iris Carrion, and then Angel Casillas is our project manager. Our website is here at the bottom, and of course our social media handles are there as well. But the website is where you can find additional information, request different trainings, and request other technical support as needed. We don't just do trainings or specialized trainings, but we can also go in and do some technical assistance with regard to clinical infrastructure and development, and really looking at best practices for Latino and Hispanic populations. Here on the right, you have the QR code, and then you also have the Survey Monkey, and we definitely encourage and ask that you go to the website here, Survey Monkey, and complete the evaluation for us. That information helps us to not only continue to get funding for our trainings, but more importantly, gives us your ideas on how we can integrate some of your needs into future trainings and really develop some of the potential trainings that are for future evolution, and add to our trainings as needed as well. So with that, I think we may have Cindy some follow-up questions, if I'm not mistaken, or if you have any other technical information to provide. I think we are ready for that now.
Thank you, Rocky.
You're welcome.
We don't seem to have questions as of right now. I don't know if we want to give like 5 minutes for people to make sure that if they have a question, they can submit it in the chat box or question box.
Yeah, let me, I'll let me just post my email address as well. If folks want to email me directly a question or talk or discuss anything with me, please feel free to email me, and we can do that as well. So if we don't have any questions in the next couple of minutes, again, I just want to say thank you all for attending this third part to our cultural elements from a peer perspective. And the next couple of sessions will be starting to kind of tie again the clinician and peer relationship and how we can work as a team rather than kind of as separate entities and be holistic in our approaches. So if there's no other questions, Cindy, I think that's all I have. And again, thank you, and thank you to the center and Dr. Miranda for introducing me and getting me to present today. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Rocky. I don't see your email and they're asking for it right now. And then someone asked about next month class. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's November 11th. Let me make sure that I paste the link so people can just have it.
Yep, the next session is, and it's looking at the conclusion. So we're looking at applications number 5, and that is on November 11th at the same time, 9 a.m.
Yeah, we're getting a couple of questions. I'm gonna go ahead and paste the link on the chat for everybody as well. So if you haven't registered, just make sure you do that. Yeah, we don't seem to have any questions regarding content. So I think that with that said, we can just go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you, Rocky, again.
Thank you
for a great presentation. And I hope that everybody has a great day.
Thank you, Cindy. Take care.
Bye.